Welcome to CircuOsity. I'm your host, Jim Strader-Sasser. CircuOsity is a podcast for spiritual seekers who may or may not be religious. My background happens to be in Anglican spirituality and in Circle Way practices, so this podcast looks to do some deep dive inquiry into emotional feelings and experiences in life that sort of draw us closer to who we are intended to be. Our practice on this podcast is to begin with a bit of poetry, and so I've chosen a segment of John O Donahue's poem Beauty. Irish poet and philosopher O'Donohue writes, "All through your life, the most precious experiences seem to vanish. Transience turns everything to error. You look behind and see no sign even of a yesterday that was so intense. Yet in truth, nothing ever disappears. Nothing is lost. Everything that happens to us in the world passes into us. It all becomes part of the inner temple of the soul, and it can never be lost. This is the art of the soul, to harvest your deeper life from all the seasons of your experience." If I were to speak to God or to the divine, if such a thing were possible, I would be saying to God, my experience right now is one of loneliness and of deep yearning for companionship and God's presence. I feel as if God is not wandering around in the world with me these days. I feel like I'm very much taking on the world on my own, and that's a very scary and lonely feeling. This is not easy work to accomplish in the work that I do as an Episcopal priest, because I'm supposed to be the one that is very much abiding with God and God abiding with me. And love is supposed to be the principal foundation of everything that happens in one's relationship with God and the divine. And yet I'm reminded of many a psalm where the psalmist writes that he is wondering how he has fallen out of God's favor, or what has he done, or what does he need to seek repentance for so as to regain God's favor. Steadfast love. Steadfast love is a biblical theme, and it is a very essential theme in human psychology too. As Brene Brown says, we are made for being and belonging. And when we seem to be out of sorts with belonging, then we really sort of fall out of sorts with ourselves and with the people around us. And if we are a faithful person in one faith tradition or another, then we are beckoned to feel as if we are not alone, but we are in touch with ourselves and in touch with those that love us and those we love, and in touch even with our enemies, in such a way so as to be more involved in the life of God and the life of being human. In some fashion, my life is speaking out of this loneliness that I experience. Parker Palmer writes, "Before you tell your life what you intend to do with it, listen for what it intends to do with you. Before you tell your life what truths and values you've decided to live up to, let your life tell you what truths you embody, what values you represent." I think the values that I represent are those of self-compassion and compassion towards others. And yet, in this loneliness that I'm experiencing, my self-care has really gone waning. It's hard to wake up in the morning and think about what it is that I want to do and who I want to do it with and what purpose it serves. When life is sort of desolate, it seems to me that it's hard to come up with answers for the questions of what my life is trying to say. I've reached out to friends and to parishioners to try and articulate what it is that I'm feeling right now. This sense of desolation, this sense of loneliness, the sense of not being sure what my purpose is anymore. And so one of my colleagues said, "Well, why don't you start the podcast up again and just speak to the community or speak to whoever listens as if you're speaking to God?" And so I am trying to let my life speak in this very vulnerable place of feeling very alone and very afraid and very anxious. And I don't know that I should put it out there online because I don't know that it serves any value other than perhaps that there may be a listener who feels like I do, and so maybe together we could figure out what it is that the answers are towards feeling better. I know that mindfulness and the practice of meditation and the practice of yoga and the practice of contemplative walking are all three ways of trying to ameliorate the anxiety that I'm feeling. And then again, as I said, it is hard to do. So I'm sharing myself with you, whoever you may be, and asking for your prayers and for your consideration. And if you wish to post something in the chat about how you're feeling or how you deal with anxiety or deal with loneliness, I would greatly appreciate it. But for now, this is my first statement on CircuOsity. And I would love to open up a conversation about this kind of loneliness or this kind of desolation that I think a lot of people are feeling right now. And what stories might we share that would help us to soften the load just a little bit? All through your life, the most precious experiences seem to vanish. Transience turns everything to air. You look behind and see no sign even of a yesterday that was so intense. Yet in truth, nothing ever disappears and nothing is lost. Everything that happens to us in the world passes into us. It all becomes part of the inner temple of the soul, and it can never be lost. This is the art of the soul, to harvest your deeper life from all the seasons of your experience. My hope for listeners today is that you will harvest some meaningful experiences from your life, and that you will recall all of those most important things that have made your life as wonderful and as interesting or as potentially possible as it could be. May we form a community here. May we learn to listen to one another with intention and speak with attention, and recognize that the wellness of the group and the wellness of our community, however small or however great, is the most meaningful thing to creating a lifelong circle of learners and leaders and those that prosper. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for the next episode, where perhaps I will have come up with some answers, or perhaps someone has offered me some wisdom as to what to do with loneliness and desolation. Take good care and blessings along the way.